Looks like it's just okay. Awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us to Cultural Intelligence, our next webinar session here with Truth and Reconciliation Month. Um, we are going to get started. There's still some people trickling in, it looks like, but just in the interest of time, we only have you for a quick 60 minutes for a lot of key topics and information that we have to cover. So let's get on the go. So my name is Tyler Geisler. That's my English name, Makwaunijinene Indigenous, Lake Manitoba Narrows Ninda, Nemuteng Dunjiba. So I live in Lake Manitoba Narrows, which is a couple hours north of Winnipeg. I'm a band member of Penamutang First Nation, which is about 2.5 hours north of Winnipeg. I'm a father of 5 sons. My background is kind of social work. I have a mental health practice part-time, and then prior to that, I've been a social worker in different medical models and social sciences and leadership and stuff like that. So that's kind of who I am. And also with me today is the brilliant.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Jillian Lysick. I've been an RN for a little over 25 years now. I'm a proud ally and an education liaison with SE Health, and I've been in this position for about 4.5 years now. I reside actually in northern Nova Scotia, so in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and I'm a wife and a mom of 2 boys. So thank you all for joining us today. So our agenda today, we're going to be talking about understanding cultural intelligence. That's going to be our primary focus. We're going to talk about the principles of culturally intelligent engagement. We're going to give you some practical strategies for fostering cultural intelligence. And we're going to talk about cultural intelligence and putting that into action and supporting reconciliation. So those are our main objectives. So first, I'll start with a land acknowledgement. So we want to start by acknowledging the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and the elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We have a slide here on just a really important self-care reminder. So this presentation will include content related to anti-Indigenous racism, systemic discrimination, and historical trauma in healthcare. So some of the material may be distressing or activating, especially for those with lived experiences. We really want you to take care of yourself in whatever way feels right. If you need to step away, go ahead, come back. If you need to reach out for support, we're here, and your well-being really matters. So please take care.
Yeah,
All right,
that
Tyler.
slide's mostly for me because when I present this content, I get real
Yeah,
passionate and
you
fired up. And
do. You need to take care
Jillian
of
has to
yourself.
say,
You
take a
do.
breath,
Deep
Tyler.
breaths,
So what
Tyler.
we're gonna do is start with a Kahoot. So everybody go on your phones right now and go to www.kahoot.it. Not .com, it's .it. So kahoot.it. And then it's gonna ask you for a game pin, which I'm gonna pull up right away.
And if you
And
have
that
your phones,
is
that's great, but you can also do it on your computers. And if you
great.
can't join for some reason, don't worry, you'll still get a lot of seeing the questions and the answers.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's kahoot.it. I'm sure you guys put it in the chat for our amazing viewers,
Yes, I think Kelsey's doing it.
participants.
It's
Okay,
there.
let's turn on the music and let's start this. I'm going to move this away over here. Start. Okay, so you're going to get a game pin that pops up on your screen now. So everybody, as mentioned, it's kahoot.it. And then just go 994032 and follow the prompts.
Or you can also use the QR
Okay.
code that's at the top of the screen. Look at all these
Yep,
people
there's also
joining.
these guys are
This
experts. Look
this
at
is
this.
exciting.
Turn up the music to set the stage, set the mood. Look at these guys. Wow, that's like the
Oh dear.
fastest I've ever seen anybody. Hopefully there's bandwidth. We will find out.
We're gonna
We
blow
got
Kahoot up.
Bihu, we've got Patricia, we've got Susanna's here, CCB, we got BGB, TZ, Nurse Gidget, Chantel Dukes. Awesome. Okay, we'll give everybody another 25 seconds for that. We got Maddie, Justine, who's up here? We got Care Bears here.
Oh, I like that one.
We've
Love.
got
It's a good one.
Natalie, Marina, Loon. Okay. We'll give everybody about 10 seconds.
Tyler, have you ever
9.
had this many people on Kahoot?
I don't think so, and they always need
No.
a little bit of help to get through it, and they're doing very, very well. So the countdown
Sure
from
are.
7, 6, Amy and MTL, Montreal maybe, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0.75, 0.5, 0.25, 0. We're starting. Okay,
Okay.
follow along and answer on your phone, please. Follow along and just answer to the best of your knowledge on your phone. Pin your answer. How are you feeling on this beautiful morning? So a little icon, a pin should come up. Put your pin how you're feeling today. How are you feeling? How's everybody doing today? You got 10 more seconds. Here comes the answers. On this beautiful September 22nd. Morning for some, afternoon for others. We got people all over. We got a couple people that are angry. That's okay. Love the fire, love the passion. Some people with bees, all these Nicolas Cage faces. Kind of funny, right? Thank you, everybody. And so far, who's winning? Kristen is winning with 873 points, followed by Carrie. Word Cloud, where are you joining us from today? So just type your response. Where are you joining us from today? Where's everybody from?
I think we're going to have an
And
all
the
over
answers are,
Canadian answer. All over Canada.
I wonder if maybe other countries as well, Jillian.
Maybe. That would be
Turtle
cool.
Island, right? Could be
Yeah.
Mexico, could be US, could be Greenland. Let's see, where do we got
One
people
from
from?
Moncton, Ontario.
Chilliwack, we got BC, we got Rolling River, we've got Yellowknife, Whitby, Flin Flon, nice.
PEI.
Brantford, we got Thompson,
Everywhere.
Treaty 5, we got Saskatoon, Tyendinaga, rural Manitoba, holler, I'm rural as well. Awesome. So we got people all over our beautiful country. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
It's great.
Pin your answer again. Cats or dogs? What kind of people we got here today? Cats or dogs?
I don't know. What if you're both? I'm kind of both. But anyway, I guess I would have to pick one.
I'm allergic to cats, but I like them. So
yeah. I have a dog, so I guess I have to say dog.
Yeah.
And he's great.
5, 4, 3, 2,
Jacqueline's
1.
both too.
Okay, we have some people all over the map. Some people are like, to heck with pets. Get them out of my house. I want nothing to do with them. Okay, good answers.
I can
awesome.
see that.
Thank you, everybody. Open-ended question. Is the term Indian safe or okay to use when discussing First Nations people? Is Indian safe to use when discussing First Nations people? Type your answer. And 5 seconds left. Answers are coming in. Okay. I want to show the answers. Yep. No. Depends. No. Safe, right? So even though some people said safe, some people said depends, you guys aren't wrong. We want to make sure that everybody has a safe platform here, that if we think of things in a different manner, that is okay. We like diverse thinking here. We're going to learn from all the different people here across Canada. We got from the Pacific up to the Arctic Ocean, across over the Atlantic, and we all have different teachings and things like that. So even though majority said no, and a few people said, well, it depends, or some people said it's safe, we can learn from them too. But what I put in here is that everyday conversation using the term Indian is kind of outdated and can be offensive when used, right? But in a legal context, it is still used in law and policy because of things like the Indian Act and status Indian, right? It's actually a legal term in those legislations, but people argue that a lot of those legislations are very colonial based and things like that. So I've talked to different elders and people who said, you know what, I'm an Indian. I'll always use the term Indian. People who are okay with it. But if maybe you're non-Indigenous, non-First Nations, and you're using it in a passive way, maybe you should know your audience and know your crowd and maybe stay away from it, right? So thank you, everybody, for all those interactions. Like seeing them.
Yes,
Next up, open-ended. Why is it important to learn historical experiences of First Nations people? Why is it important to learn these things? See, some question is cut off. Okay, 20 seconds left. Five, four, three, two, one. Let's see what people said. Okay, let's show those answers. Well, why is it important to learn about the history? Reconciliation, right? And we see all these different words that come up in duplicates. So people who said we need to know the history, culturally, understanding, better we see reconciliation, anti-oppressive, safety, right? Colonization, practices, values. Very, very good answers, everybody. Very, very good answers. And they're 100% right. We have a responsibility for truth, right? We need to know the truth. We need to know where we were so we know where we're going. Awesome stuff. And just like it says here, to acknowledge truth, promote reconciliation, challenge stereotypes, right? Replaces myth with real knowledge of what actually happened, right? There's a lot of myth out there and things that didn't actually happen, and it reinforces negative stereotypes and unfair stereotypes that once we actually acknowledge what actually happened, we have a much better understanding why certain people and demographics and communities are the way they are, and we can have maybe a more empathetic heart and mind when we're addressing those things. A poll. So can I say the Indigenous culture when discussing things about First Nations people? Can I say Indigenous culture when discussing things about First Nations people?
These guys are quick.
These guys are quick. We got 5 seconds left. Okay, the poll is 66% said, can we say Indigenous people when discussing First Nations? 56%, over half of you said, yeah, you can. Some people said sometimes, some people said no, some people said only when you know the people. Okay, very good, diverse answers. Answers all across the board. I love it. Let's see kind of what we put. These require a lot more discussion, but we're just kind of touching base on it. So when we use First Nations, when we're discussing First Nations people and discussing First Nations, right? It's kind of pan-indigenizing, right? Pan-indigenizing means it's kind of a one size fits all, right? So say if I'm talking, you know what, First Nations people always have sweat lodges and smudge during cultural ceremony. That's not necessarily true. That might be okay here in my Treaty 2 territory in Manitoba with Ojibwe, Cree nations, but that might not be the same for the Mi'kmaq people in Atlantic Canada, right? Or our nations in British Columbia, or Inuit or First Nations up north in Nunavut and Northwest Territories and Yukon and things like that, right? So we can't just say, oh, I heard the First Nations people do this, right? And then they explain something. Maybe just that one nation does that, right? But not all First Nations people. So you're pan-indigenizing, right? It erases the diversity and continues colonial thinking. It misrepresents traditions, right? So there are literally hundreds of nations in Canada, right? And even my nation of Ojibwe might be a lot different than some customs and cultures and practices of Ojibwe people in Southern Ontario, right? There's Ojibwe people is there as well. Their language dialects might be a little bit different. Their customs and cultures for their ceremonies might be a little bit different. I can't just go there and assume that, oh, I'm Ojibwe, they're Ojibwe, they're going to practice the same thing, right? We have to make sure we're not pan-indigenizing. And it's always safe to say, you know what, the way I've learned in my nation or from this elder, from this knowledge keeper, from my community is this, right? So just being aware that we don't want to blanket statements. Do you have any racial biases? Yes, no, maybe, not really. Do you have any racial biases? Yes, no, maybe, not really.
I think this is our last question, Tyler.
This is the last question, you bet. Okay, let me see those answers. So if the answers are big, That's because multiple people answered those answers. So a lot of people said maybe, a lot of people said yes, a lot of people said no, right? So again, we have really diverse answers all across the spectrum, right? I think we all do. Some people put yes, everyone does not really. I don't think so. Maybe, no, right? Okay, awesome stuff. So let's just see. Let's go next. There's a podium of somebody who won. Everybody, give some snaps for Natalie. Woo. In second place with 1709, Kristen. And first place, everybody, give a good emoji for Alex. A nice celebratory emoji in the chat, please. Good job, Alex. So we're going to exit this. I am going to make my screen different. Awesome. Thank you for playing along. So now we're going to discuss a little bit. There we go. I'm going to delete that, leave, and we're going to go back to this here. Awesome. You can see my screen again, Jillian?
Yes, but yep, perfect. Now just go to the next slide and we're back on track. Thanks everyone for playing.
Yes, thank you. Here we go. So understanding cultural intelligence. So what culture, we're going to get to some of those questions that you guys responded. Thank you so much, everybody, for playing. But what cultural intelligence is, what we're talking about today is it's a capability to work effectively across cultural differences. The widely used CQ model has 4 different parts. So we're talking about cultural intelligence. We want to talk about our motivation. What's our motivation, our drive to be more culturally intelligent, our knowledge, what we currently know, and how we want to expand it. The strategy, how do you plan on acquiring that knowledge, right? Do we want to just go and read what we see in the media or on TikTok or whatever it might be? Or do we want to go and strategize and gain that knowledge from knowledge keepers, elders, stakeholders, communities, attending different ceremonial practices and things like that, right? Really living it. And then same with action is actually going into those situations and things like that to actually gain that cultural intelligence, right? So furthermore, there's the cognitive component, which we kind of discussed, was just aspect involving knowledge about different cultures and cultural norms. Your motivation. Motivation drives individuals to engage and adapt within diverse cultural settings. And I also want to mention as well that we're not just talking about First Nations, Inuit, Métis people. It's reciprocal, right? It's back and forth. Canada is full of diverse nations from all across this world, right? We have to look at how we can be more culturally intelligent, culturally humble, and culturally safe, not only with First Nations people, but also with those people who have come to Canada as well, right? Because a lot of people are non-Indigenous working in First Nations communities, right? So we've got to try to extend an olive branch and learn from them, just like they have to try to learn from First Nations people as well. And then behavioral skills, enabling effective adaptation and communication across cultures, right? We're going to kind of talk about how some of these things can become problemsome when we when we reinforce negative stereotypes about certain cultures, right? So we want to make sure that we're bridging cultural gaps. Cultural intelligence enables understanding and connection between different cultural groups. And that's why we reiterate that, right? We're talking about different cultural groups, not just First Nations in Canada. Effective communication, ensuring clear and respectful communication, reducing misunderstandings in multicultural settings, right? Cultural intelligence fosters teamwork and cooperation. Because, like I said, we all have different teams. I've worked on so many different communities where they have newcomers to Canada, people who have been here for years, and there's been sometimes not the nicest stereotypes mentioned towards those people, but also same thing as not very nice stereotypes and assumptions made of First Nations people, right? So if we communicate and really learn and are empathetic and actively listening to one another and want to genuinely learn from each other, we're going to have a lot better teamwork, communication in whatever role you're playing, whether it's with teams or you're working with patients or you're working with clients. Jillian.
Okay, my turn now, Tyler. So we're going to talk for a second about why respectful relationships matter. And when we talk about building respectful relationships, cultural intelligence is really at the heart of it. Developing that cultural intelligence really means building on that ability to understand and appreciate and adapt to cultural differences. It's not always about memorizing facts about culture. You want to be curious and humble and open to perspectives that are different from our own. Mutual respect and trust are the foundation of every healthy relationship. And this is really especially true across those cultural boundaries, where histories of harm, colonialism, and mistrust may exist. And we know that trust isn't automatic. We earn trust, right? Through those consistent actions and the way we engage with people. And we really want to create space where people and communities feel heard and valued and seen. So this image on this slide is actually a powerful reminder of sharing. So, food is often central to Indigenous teachings. It's about reciprocity and community and building those relationships. And just as a meal is not only about the food, it's a lot about the company. So, cultural intelligence is not just knowledge, it's about the relationship, the respect, and the responsibility. So, really going deeper into those relationships more than surface level and really getting to know each other. All right, Tyler, you have a
100%.
Google search
Yeah, I've got a Google
next.
search, and
I
what
like
this kind
this.
of is, yeah, and it's a really good reminder of how earlier in the Kahoot I asked, do you have any racial biases? And we had a huge answer of people saying maybe, a huge answer of people saying yes, and a huge answer of people saying no. They were all ballooned up, meaning multiple people answered those. So for the people that said maybe, you have racial biases. For the people that said yes, you already know that. For the people that said no, you probably don't think you do. We usually try to think that if we do have racial biases, maybe we're being mean or we kind of look down upon ourselves, but we all have racial biases in some sense, right? Even with Google searches, right? So when we type in just a few words into Google, all you have to put is you go into Google search engine, you type in do First Nations, and then Google will auto complete the rest of the suggestions, right? So, and those suggestions that pop up on Google are usually from questions other people have asked Google, right? So if you just go into Google, do First Nations dot, you get something like this: do First Nations, and then this drop down bar comes, do they pay taxes, right? There's a lot of misconceptions on First Nations not paying taxes, right? I'm a, status Indian according to legislation, but I have to pay taxes, right? I have to pay income tax, paying taxes in Canada. Do you need a fishing license? Well, if you don't have your status card, you definitely need a fishing license. And a lot of people don't have their status card because of certain things. Like it could even be literacy. Getting those cards are very, very difficult to get. And if you don't have that, then you need to buy a fishing license, right? I went to university. I didn't get any free university. Wherever people are getting this stuff, please show me the way, right? Pay taxes on vehicles, get free money, right? So we see a bunch of misconceptions here in Google really quickly of just Google can even work on their cultural intelligence, right? Curiosity is healthy and can lead to cultural intelligence. So we want people to remain curious. We want you to ask those questions, right? If there's difficult questions to ask and you don't really know something about a certain culture, ask those questions. But I also want to reiterate that the person who's receiving those questions, maybe it's a First Nations person or it's a person of a different ethnicity or culture, if people are asking you those questions, don't storm back at that person with a response of, venom and hot fire, and you're saying, oh, that's a very ignorant question or anything like that. You have to use it as a teaching moment and say, you know what, thanks for the question. This is actually your answer, and explain it to them, right? Because if they ask a question and they actually don't know, and you tell them they asked a question that's very ignorant or whatever it is, they'll probably bottle up and never ask a question ever again, right? Because that's the response they got, right? So we have to be willing to teach each other and educate each other.
Mhm.
Jillian.
All right, so we're going to talk for a few minutes about the principles of culturally intelligent engagement. So, engaging with Indigenous peoples and peoples of any culture really requires respecting their traditions, practicing empathy, and confronting those personal biases, as Tyler was talking about a few minutes ago. And these principles guide respectful and effective interactions. Next slide, please, Tyler. Thank you. So, respecting traditions, values, and worldviews is at the heart of building meaningful relationships with communities. So, too often, dominant systems have dismissed or devalued Indigenous knowledges, practices, and the ways of seeing the world. So, cultural intelligence calls us to do the opposite. We want to listen, we want to learn, and honor those perspectives. And when we look at honoring cultural perspectives, we recognize and value Indigenous traditions. We always want to acknowledge the wisdom that has guided those communities for generations. And this can look like things like making space for ceremonies, attending ceremonies, respecting the roles and speaking to elders, supporting that land based learning, or simply asking a community how they would like to engage. When we use cultural practices and we're respecting those, it really it really will tend to strengthen those mutual respect and deepen those relationships. And then when we look at fostering trust, we know that trust is usually not given automatically. You have to earn that trust, and you earn it through consistent actions of respect. So when we take the time to understand Indigenous worldviews, whether that's the concept of community, that connection to the land, the role that spirituality might play, we show that we value more than just our own lens, and respecting these worldviews promotes that trust and opens those doors for communication, and really opens the doors for meaningful long term engagement with Indigenous communities. Tyler.
Thank you for that, Jillian. And so, with cultural safety, right, described as an outcome based on respectful engagement, recognizing and striving to address power imbalances. So, when we're working in healthcare, and it's not even just healthcare, it doesn't matter
Mhm,
what sector you work in, right? We want to make sure that
mhm,
we're providing culturally safe um, practices within our workplace, right? Even in hospitals and things like that, right? I've worked with people where maybe they want to smudge. They want to smudge. It's one of their healing practices, but some hospitals don't have air exchange systems, and it's policy that they can't smudge in their hospital room or whatever it might be because of the smoke, right? So we want to make sure that we're adapting our policies and procedures in a way that instead of always making First Nations people kind of fit the policy, maybe making the policy fit their cultural practices, right? As the First Nations of Canada, right? So just making sure that we're understanding that, right? Just the image of the forest path that we see reminds us that on the screen is that this journey, we want to walk respectfully with the people that we're working with, that we're engaging with. Learning step by step requires humility and care. Trust is built the same way, slowly, intentionally, always with respect for where we're walking and who we're walking with. What I want everybody to do now, I got this beautiful screen on here. I don't know if anybody's going somewhere warm for the winter coming up, but we're going to do just a quick little exercise. So I want everybody, wherever you are, um, just to close your eyes, and I'm just going to walk you through a visualization of a beautiful vacation. Okay? So just listen, close your eyes, and relax. So you're walking in the airport. You've got your luggage, you're pulling it behind you on its wheels, you're excited for your vacation, and you're walking in the airport to your next gate so you can board your flight. As you're walking in the big airport, you see to your right, there's a couple that's getting married, and or they're not getting married, they're proposing to each other. And you see this couple proposing, one goes down on the knee, and they propose, pull out this ring. They say yes. Everybody starts clapping. Wow, there's a beautiful proposal. You smile and you keep walking towards your gate. You see the airline worker. They check your tickets. They tell you to board the plane. You can go and hit the runway. You board your plane. You see the flight attendants. You say hello. The pilots say hello to you. You take your seat. Before the plane can leave, though, somebody kind of gets in medical distress. They're having a little bit of difficulty breathing. Somebody calls for the doctor. For a doctor on the flight, yep, there's somebody there. A doctor comes and helps. They stabilize that person, take them off the plane to go get further medical attention. Everything is back calm and safe again, and you take off to your beautiful sunny destination. So that is the visualization, right? So what I want everybody to do now is go onto the chat And I want you to put, there's absolutely zero judgment here for everybody. Okay. That's what I want to reinforce, right? But I want you to answer in honesty. Okay. Now, when I explained that the couple was proposing to each other, they pulled out the ring. What genders were the couple? What sexual orientation were they? Were they heterosexual, meaning straight? Were they two women? Were they two men? Were they trans? Were they man and woman? When did know that? Yeah, hetero. Yeah, two men, hetero, hetero, hetero. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for answering. Thank you, thank you. Keep them coming. Yeah, hetero, hetero, straight, hetero, hetero, two women, hetero, no clue, hetero. Thank you, everybody. And that's the point. Okay, thank you. Now, when you boarded your plane and you seen the flight attendants and the flight attendant said hello, what was the gender of the flight attendants? Gender and their skin color or ethnicity, whatever you want to say. The flight attendants. Female, yeah, Caucasian woman, female Caucasian, white woman, white, yeah, white. Perfect. Thank you. Great, great answers.
Mhm.
Women, African, female, white. Now, when you seen the pilot in your mind, what was the gender and ethnicity of the pilots? White male, yeah, male, Caucasian male, white male, yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Keep them coming. And then somebody went into medical distress. They called for a doctor on the plane. What was the doctor? Same question. What was the doctor? Doctor, male Caucasian, female, male white, male Caucasian, male, no idea, male. Very good answers. Asian, right? Okay, so very, very good. Thank you, everybody. That's probably enough of a sample size we have from all of you. But that just goes to show that most of us have some kind of a biases because in that visualization exercise, I said a couple was proposing to each other. They said yes, pulled out a ring. I said a couple. I didn't say it was a heterosexual couple, a male and a female. I didn't say it was two men. I didn't say it was two women. I didn't say it was trans. I didn't give you any identifying information. Same with the flight attendants. I just said the flight attendant said hi to you, the pilot said hi to you, the doctor said hi and helped out the person. I didn't get to say the female flight attendants. I didn't say the female white flight attendants. I didn't say the white male pilots or the white male or the Asian male doctor, right? All I said was flight attendants and pilots said hello to you. And now when we look at what we visualized with all of these answers, right? We have all these biases because we create shortcuts in our mind when we think of a pilot. We think, oh, white male. When we think of this couple getting married, boom, we go to heterosexual man and woman couple, right? That could have been two men or two women getting married, right? But right away we go to whatever shortcut our brain sinks into, right? And that's our unconscious biases that we all have, right? And we do the same thing with cultures, right? If we are talking about Black people, or we are talking about Asian people, or First Nation people, or East Indian people, whatever it might be, we have conscious shortcuts that creates biases and stereotypes of what we've been conditioned to think of in our brain already, right? And sometimes
Mhm.
that shows up unconsciously. Beverly says these unconscious biases are based
Mhm.
on our experience. You nailed it, Bev,
For sure.
100%. Lorna didn't answer because there's no descriptions, and that's okay, Lorna.
Mm.
So maybe you don't have that much of a bias, right? There was no descriptions, right? And some people also just can't see things into their brain. Actually, they can't have mental imagery. But the point of it is just like you said, Beverly, is that these unconscious biases are based on our experiences, what we lived throughout life in, right? But sometimes those unconscious biases are unfair stereotypes that we cast on people, even if it's at our workplace. If we had a negative experience with a certain gender or a certain cultural person, 10 years ago, we might start trying to generalize all those people who are similar to that person as the same way, right? Biases are bombarded through media, film, news as well, not just 100%, Jacqueline. We get all of these biases that are bombarding us from media and film and things like that. And we have to make sure that we give everybody an equal chance to represent themselves, right? Just because you meet a certain person of a certain gender, a certain ethnicity who may have done you harm in the past doesn't mean all those people are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even little things like when 9/11 happened, September 11, 2001, we seen the two planes hit the Twin Towers. It was all blamed on the Muslim population, Islamic, right? And now that's all we think of these people, right? Is that they're all strapping bombs or they all wear turbans and things like that. Even if they're not Islamic, we just unfairly do this to people, right? So we have to make sure that we're not doing that. Bev says, so when one does not have the opportunity to experience others' cultures and environments, true that media is 100% Bev. So we have to
Yep.
make sure that we're open to other cultures. Furthermore, just a quick quote. Um, the goal of cultural intelligence is not to pretend we don't have biases, it's to recognize them, right? We all have biases somewhere in our lives, right? Pause and choose a more respectful and informed way of thinking and acting, right? It's just about, it's not pretending we don't have them. We all have them, and that's okay if we have them. What is not okay is that if we don't acknowledge them, right? It's acknowledging them and recognizing them. Cultural humility, further to intelligence, is an ongoing practice of self reflecting and self critiquing, right? We always want to look at ourselves. It's lifelong. This isn't just a little workshop and you're like, okay, I'm more culturally humble now, or I'm more culturally intelligent. It's a lifelong practice because you're constantly being bombarded by media and different experiences throughout your life. So you constantly have to keep doing self inventories and checks on yourself about how maybe your biases are impacting the people around you or the work that you do or those misconceptions, right? Furthermore, to cultural humility, so everybody sees this, right? So cultural humility is understanding that we don't try to cast these negative stereotypes and cast these unfair biases and things like that, but um, everybody are perpetrators of this. We've all done it somewhere in our lives, right? And this is just a story recently that was kind of trending on social media. I don't know, probably a lot of people have heard of this, but we see this status card, certificate of Indian status, and the person on there stereotypically looked like an East Indian to a lot of people. And we even see the comment, somebody shared it. I heard years ago this was happening. These people were buying treaty cards from various reserves. They need to search that band number on the card, right? So right away, this was trending across Canada over the last couple of weeks. People are saying this. I heard this was happening. I heard this was happening. These people, who do they mean by these people? They mean whoever they think this ethnicity is. We're buying treaty cards from various reserves, right? So we just go and, blindly spew all of this rhetoric and false claims and stuff like that. We're blasting this guy, right? Then we look, and this was served by Opaskwayak Cree Nation here in the Paw. And what this letter is, I'm not going to read the whole thing for interest of time, but what this says is that Opaskwayak Cree Nation and their membership and their chief and council said, you know what, shame on all of us. Shame on everybody who shared this picture and casted rocks at this guy, just like an old public square, and we're all throwing rocks at this individual
Mm-hmm.
because in fact, he is a member of Opaskwayak Cree Nation. He is a First Nations man, right? And they claim that. And they basically said, we've got to do better, having more cultural humility and making sure that we aren't quickly just jumping to judgment based on just this picture, right? Nobody, and I found a bunch of TikToks of people blasting this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody fact checked and they just blasted him instead and threw
Yeah.
rocks and casted stones at him. But he is actually a First Nations of Opaskwayak Cree Nation, right? So it's not just a one-way street where First Nations are always recipient of racial rhetoric or racial comments. It can be we're doing the same thing to other people as well, right? And I've seen it in very many different arenas and spectrums, whether it's digital or in person. And we have to be mindful of our cultural intelligence, our cultural humility, and being culturally safe to people we work with, right?
Mm-hmm. Too many assumptions
Uh,
being made, right?
exactly. So, practical strategies for fostering cultural intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Furthermore, just recognizing, confronting biases, right? Acknowledging your biases. We've kind of heard this theme now, recognizing both
Mm-hmm.
your implicit and explicit biases. So, our explicit biases are things that we openly show that we're biased to, right? Implicit are those unconscious ones, right? We might not even recognize that we're being implicitly biased sometimes, right? But we are. Overcoming barriers. Addressing biases helps break down barriers and promotes honest relationships with people of different cultures, right? Building respectful relationships, confronting biases fosters honesty, respectful relationships between individuals and Indigenous communities, right? And I've seen that so many times where non-Indigenous people might come to like a powwow, right? They may have never been to a reserve in their life, right? And they had unfair assumptions and expectations and biases and stereotypes of First Nations. And when they come to a powwow and they see how beautiful and brilliant the culture is, and the music and the beat of the drum, right? And people will gather you, and all of a sudden you're in the round dance now holding hands, and they're just like, oh my God, they feel so awful because of some of the unfair judgments they've cast, right? And I've also seen it the other way around as well, where people might have feasts or you're learning about other cultures, and it's just a really nice way to bridge those relationships and bridge those gaps where we only know so much of what we're taught, right? So be open to new
Mhm.
ways of learning. Reflecting on our biases, understanding the implicit biases complex and perpetuate stereotypes, mindfulness and changing perspective, right? So we want to, like I said, it's lifelong learning. It's constantly being mindful, checking your biases at your door and thinking, how is this affecting uh, my ability to be a good mental health counselor, to be a good facilitator, to be a good nurse, to be a good physician, to be a good leader, right? We've all got biases and we've got to understand how is this impacting how I work with people. First-hand cultural experiences. So, like I said, participating in Indigenous events allows direct interaction. Going to powwows or ceremonies or feasts and things like that. Whatever ceremony your region holds, go to those and learn from them. Right? There's a good quote of we want to listen to understand, not to teach, right? Sometimes we'll be listening and we're not even listening. We're just going to tell them what we think, right? We don't always have to tell everybody
Mhm.
what we think and teach people, right? We just have to listen and really take it in and challenge our own beliefs, constantly challenging yourself. Deepening respect, engaging, fostered deeper respect and appreciation for First Nations heritage. Community-led initiatives, so collaboration with Indigenous leaders promotes initiative driven by community needs and values, ensuring projects respect and incorporate Indigenous cultural practices, supporting Indigenous priorities, aligning with Indigenous goals and perspectives to empower communities sustainably.
Okay, you can have a break for a few minutes, Tyler.
Thanks.
Get a drink of water. All right, we're going to talk for a few minutes about cultural intelligence and putting that into action through supporting reconciliation. So, next slide, please, Tyler. So, this is Murray Sinclair. He shared what is the purpose of Truth and the Reconciliation Report to arm responsible people of Canada who are ready to do something. These people are ready to do something are allies, right? So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission provided those directly or indirectly affected by the legacy of the Indian residential school system with an opportunity to share stories and their experiences. The TRC then spent 6 years traveling to all parts of Canada and heard from more than 6,500 people. It hosted 7 national events across Canada to engage the Canadian public, to educate about the history and legacy of the residential school, and to share and honor the experiences of the former students and their families. So, from this, in December 2015, the TRC released its entire 6-volume report. So, this report is a testament to the courage of each and every survivor and family member who were willing to share their stories. The calls to action released in the final report are calls for all Canadians to answer. They are collectively a responsibility where everyone can play a role in part of reconciliation, that healing, and moving forward. This knowledge that has been shared with all of us through the TRC is really a gift. So now we know the truth. And these gifts also become our responsibility to use, to acknowledge, to honor, to share, to educate, and to help hold safe space for others who have yet to share their life and their experiences. All right. So the 6 actions of reconciliation, as outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation, calls for action and action plans. So I'll go through those quickly now. One is to learn, and we want to learn about the history between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Learning requires really unlearning myths and listening to Indigenous voices and recognizing that this history continues to shape our present. And we want to understand. We want to understand the history and legacy of the residential schools. They cause deep harm and intergenerational trauma. We want to understand how facing this truth, we want to face the truth and recognize both the pain and the resilience of the people that attended these schools. And we also want to explore intersections of treaty, constitutional, Indigenous, and human rights. So treaties and Indigenous rights are central to Canada's identity and the justice system. So exploring these intersections really helps us to see our shared responsibilities. Next slide. Thank you. And the last three are to recognize. So we want to recognize the Indigenous contributions to Canada. Indigenous peoples have shaped Canada through governance, culture, and stewardships, and often despite multiple systemic barriers. So recognition is both acknowledgeable and celebration. And we want to take action. So addressing those historical and present injustices. So reconciliation requires concrete steps. We want to support Indigenous-led initiatives, challenge that racism, and hold ourselves accountable to act. And the last action is to teach. Teach others what you've learned. Share what you've learned, formally or informally, while centering on Indigenous voices. Really, teaching will help break that cycle of ignorance and builds that collective understanding among people. All right,
100%,
time.
Jillian. I just have so many light bulbs going off in my head, but we only have so much time. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what this presentation is, right? To everybody, is that even though this is just a quick 1 hour webinar, it's there's a lot more discussion that needs to be done about this. And it's like this is like an appetizer sampler. You're just getting a little
It
taste of
is.
it. But if you ever wanted more education on this, by all means, we travel Canada too, and we teach. So, but creating spaces for dialogue and story sharing. I talked about this a little bit earlier, right? Fostering open conversations, creating safe spaces encourages honest dialogue and promotes mutual understanding across cultures, right? Like I said, it's a two-way street where I've heard racial rhetoric and stereotypes from all walks of life casting at other people. Just like in the example we just shown with the young man who everybody was basically trending on social media, casting stones at him that, oh, this guy is just, they buy these status Indian cards, which he didn't. He's a member of that nation, but we all just casted stones without actually doing any fact checking, right? These people was one of the things that was referred to, right? Sharing personal stories, story sharing nurtures empathy and healing by connecting, building your stronger relationships, keeping open dialogue. Like I said earlier, if somebody has a question about your culture, your ethnicity, your way of life, and it sounds ignorant, it's because they may just not have ever been around your people or your
Mm-hmm.
culture or your families. Doesn't matter what your culture is, right? They may have just never been around it, right? So don't cast stones at them. Try to just teach them. Use it as a teaching moment, right? We want to use water rather than fire, right? We want to calm
Mm-hmm.
the situation because if we don't teach them and use it as a teaching moment, and we tell them that they're ignorant or they shouldn't be asking questions like that, or oh, you're wrong, or anything like that, they'll probably never ask that question again, and they'll never learn from that culture, right? So we want to use these as learning opportunities to teach other people your way of life. Cultural respect, so it's more than just a checklist, right? So we're here, in a week from tomorrow, it's Truth and Reconciliation Day, right? People are going to be wearing orange shirts, right? They may buy, orange shirts in bulk off Amazon instead of supporting a local Indigenous company. So that's not true cultural respect, right? That's not true cultural allyship, right? We want to be a true ally to First Nations people. Okay, I can put on this orange shirt, I'm doing my part, the whole organization's doing it, and then you just go and go on with your day, right? It's not a checklist where you can just check off, oh, we did the orange shirts, right? True cultural respect, truth and reconciliation is actually being mindful and making items actionable. That's why they call it reconciliation, right? We want to make sure these items are actionable, where you're actually looking at your policies, your procedures. You're looking, what does this orange shirt that I'm wearing today actually represent, right? There's a story by Phyllis Webstad is actually who the story is about. And You should go and read about it after this. But why we wear orange shirts, you should really look at that story. And just that little color of representation of orange will be a reminder on that day. And whenever you, and even aside from Orange Shirt Day, you should be wearing orange different days as well, right? Um, but even when you're buying your orange shirts, try to find an Indigenous business who maybe they create shirts. Maybe they're an Indigenous artist that you can get onto your orange shirt. That's what we did here at SE Health, First Nation Inuit Métis program. We partnered with an Indigenous artist. They they created this beautiful Indigenous artwork. We put it onto the T-shirts that we now wear for Orange T-shirt Day. We paid them, right? That is true cultural respect, true allyship when we're actually changing and recognizing things and trying to build First Nation communities, right? Truly reflecting and acknowledging.
Mhm. All right, so we're almost done, guys. We have a few more minutes. So I just want to talk for a minute about advocating for policies that honor Indigenous rights. So we're centering Indigenous voices. So policies should not be designed in isolation. Indigenous leadership and knowledge must shape decisions from the start. So our role is to advocate for meaningful representation, not token consultation. And on our first webinar, Doris and Candace had talked about the treaties and UNDRIP. So just a reminder that treaties are legally binding and UNDRIP provides a roadmap for that justice and reconciliation. Advocacy means reminding policymakers that honoring these commitments is not optional, it's a responsibility. And addressing systemic inequality. So too many policies still reinforce those barriers in health, housing, education, and justice. Effective advocacy really pushes for structural change that addresses root causes rather than those patchwork solutions. And supporting self-determination. So true reconciliation respects Indigenous nations' inherent right to self-governance. Policies must create space for Indigenous communities to lead, define their priorities, and implement their own solutions. And finally, building accountability. So without accountability, policy just becomes empty promises. So advocates should demand transparent reporting, those measurable progresses, and Indigenous oversight to ensure those commitments are being kept. And I think we
Thank
have
you so
some
much, Jillian.
recommended reading, Tyler. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
but first, before we move there, I think just there's some
Yeah.
really good dialogue happening in our chat right now, and
Oh,
thank you everybody
perfect.
for putting your chats in there.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're trying to learn from each other, right? All questions are very, very welcomed. That's how
Yes,
we learn. I learn from you, you learn from us, and it's back and forth. But Rena said,
sure.
my experience has been that sometimes it takes a few times of teaching opportunities or calling the racism out in order to have the other person challenge their own biases. 100%. This is cultural intelligence, right? Is that when
Sure.
you're learning, say, a new language, you don't just practice it once or twice and now you know that language, right? When you're learning to change your behaviors and maybe even like, say, things like a diet, you're trying to eat differently, you're trying to stay away from certain foods, you do it for 1 or 2 days, doesn't mean you're going to get to where you want to go, right? This is a lifelong practice where you might have to do it over and over and over to get where you need to get. It takes
Mhm,
constant questioning yourself, questioning your own biases to change those
mhm.
behaviors. Beverly says something really good here as well with she said, one of my health directors made regalia for my two young daughters and invited us to the community powwow and joined in the dances. We all had so much fun, built stronger relationships. Exactly, Beverly.
So
Perfect,
nice.
perfect example.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We're not First Nations or Indigenous, but first, second gen Canadian from German, Russian heritage, right? And you probably
Mhm,
had the best
mhm,
experience, Beverly, right? And a lot of people don't get those experiences. They are shown the negative stereotypes or the negative misconceptions of First Nations people because, oh, I watched the news and I seen there's First Nations people who are in jail or they're wanted or they broke into something or there was a homicide, right? And then they start taking that, they start linking First Nations as those people they see on the news, right?
mhm.
That's not fair though, right? There are way more people than that, right? Just like other walks of life. We can't be stereotyping just based on what we see in media. Furthermore, Barb said, very good question. You said, is it okay to ask? Every question is okay to ask here, Barb. Thank you so much. I've been told that it's not First Nations' job to educate me. Has that idea changed? I think a little bit of both. I think it is, I think as First Nations people, we can educate others. It shouldn't be solely that responsibility. I think we should take our own ownership to learn about other walks of life as well, right? Just on our own. I think it's always good to go
Definitely.
right to And then Michelle Stoney says on Etsy. Okay, Jeanette is just saying that Michelle is on Etsy, the Gitxsan First Nation member. Her artwork is stunning. Yes, be a good ally. Go to Michelle's page on Etsy.
And Tyler,
Reese
that last
says,
comment,
I
that,
wonder about
yeah,
when does someone respectfully tell someone to educate themselves? It can be really
ties in.
exhausting to have to continue. 100%. And they can educate themselves. And there's a lot of really good, maybe that's something we should have put in the webinar, but well, we kind of did coming up in the final couple slides, but going and educating themselves on different really good scholarly articles and good avenues of media, right? You want to go to people who might be purporting or um, reinforcing negative stereotypes. But I'm going to give you this right now. So these are some of the recommended readings, just like Reese said, right? Shouldn't be all on First Nations. We should be doing our own research and education as well. And there's these really good books here with Truth and Reconciliation by Jody Wilson-Raybould, Who We Are by Justice Murray Sinclair, 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, right? Brianna further says Indigenous rights, excellent book that breaks down, thank you so much, Brianna, breaks
Yep.
down the Indian Act and explains historical implications on intergenerational trauma. And that's same with me when I've worked with different people who had certain misconceptions of stereotypes of First Nations people. When I've worked with them and they learn about the historical impacts and the colonization and stuff like that, they pretty much for the most time come around, right? They come around and they're like, "Oh, I'm really glad I understand this a lot better. I feel bad that I had negative stereotypes." Some people are not like that. Some people just hold on to their misconceptions, hold on to their stereotypes. All you can try to do is plant a seed, and every time you try to teach them, it's like you're pouring water on the seed. But sometimes those seeds won't grow with some people. They just gotta they have a garden of concrete for whatever reason, and it won't grow. It's like the old saying of you can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So thank you, Jeanette. Um, Dan just said found this presentation very First Nation centric and use Indigenous quite sorry, everybody's when you artwork is also for if you ever want to chat, I am director of Indigenous 100% Dan. Thank you so much. A big fan of Wob Canoe's book. Yes, Wob is a brilliant author. He has a couple good books. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, and then we just have our next webinar since we're wrapping up on the hour, Reconciliation in Healthcare. It's our final webinar for the month, next month. So please attend. Thank you, everybody, so much. You guys were amazing and super communicative. We learned from each other. If you could just, before you leave, do a
Quick survey, really quick.
Yeah, quick survey QR. It's only a couple questions. I hope you guys learned from Jillian and I. Question yourselves today. Go and question other people. Just really look into yourselves and challenge your biases. And like I said, thank you so much for joining. If
Thank
anybody
you
else has
very
any
much.
questions, we'll be monitoring the chat.
Everybody have a good rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I wish it was longer, but maybe one day we'll see you in person. Thank you, Jamie. Of course, thank you, Rena. That's what we shoot for, is just trying to make a safe space to ask all the questions.